Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission is to take an iconic public figure, stack up all the available sources, and find the subterranean truths that truly explain their genius. Today we're looking at a man whose name is synonymous with perfect harmony, a voice so pure and transcendent that it instantly defined an entire generation of music. We are diving deep into the world of Arthur Ira Garfunkel.
And while the immediate public image is always, linked to Paul Simon, we are here to explore the man defined by these extraordinary paradoxes. We're tracking the trail of a dedicated intellectual who earned 2 advanced degrees, a published poet, and this solitary figure who embarked on a decades-long mission to walk across continents. How does a man who achieved this monumental collaborative success cope with deep personal depression, and why did he repeatedly seek refuge in mathematics, architecture, and just epic physical solitude?
That tension, right, between the ethereal angel voice and the hyper-disciplined architect, that is the core of this deep dive. We've compiled material covering his entire career, from his childhood experiments in the 1950s all the way through to his recent family collaborations in 2024. We are looking for that common thread that runs through his education, the bitter history with Simon, his solo peaks, and those just astonishing epic treks.
And to set the stage for our analysis of that unique voice, let's anchor ourselves with one specific fact. In 2008, Rolling Stone ranked Art Garfunkel 86th among the 100 greatest singers of all time.
That's not about popularity.
No, that ranking isn't about sales figures. It's a technical recognition of the sheer quality of his tenor. If you listen to their work, Paul Simon's voice is the earthy, rhythmic texture, but Garfunkel's is the purity that floats above, carrying the melodic line into the stratosphere. He is a technical marvel, and that foundation of discipline starts incredibly young.
Okay, so let's track that meticulous foundation. Arthur Ira Garfunkel was born in Forest Hills, Queens in 1941. He was the middle son, and his background is deeply rooted in the immigrant experience. His paternal grandparents emigrated from II in Romania.
Right. And his father, Jacob Jack Garfunkel, was a traveling salesman who also had a brief history as an actor, so you can almost see an early exposure to performance and mobility there.
And what's fascinating here is how immediately this discipline manifests in his relationship with sound. Garfunkel himself has traced his love of singing back to the first grade.
But it wasn't just humming along. He talks about seeking out specific acoustic environments. He would stand in the stairwell of his building, long after everyone else had left, just enjoying the echo off the tiles as he sang popular standards of the day. He specifically mentions Unchained Melody and You'll Never Walk Alone.
That is an amazing detail. It's just a self-awareness of sonic architecture before he even knew what architecture was.
Exactly. He wasn't just loving the sound. He was consciously engaging with the acoustics of the space to enhance his performance. Wow.
And that early systematic self-correction is reinforced by another key detail from the sources. His father bought him a wire recorder, which for a young boy in the 1950s, that was a significant, pretty advanced piece of equipment.
A huge deal. And Garfunkel didn't treat it like a toy. He dedicated time to recording his singing and immediately playing it back. His goal wasn't merely practice. It was to identify flaws in his delivery, intonation, and phrasing, and then work to improve them.
So he was his own vocal coach from the start.
He was applying a technical, almost engineering mindset to a purely emotional art form. It sets the template for the entire rest of his career.
And that focus on structure and technical perfection then carries over into his religious life. He was clearly trained from a young age, singing frequently in the synagogue.
Right, and his bar mitzvah in 1954 wasn't just a brief ceremony. He performed as a cantor, singing over 4 hours of repertoire for the celebration.
4 hours for a 13-year-old.
4 hours. Think about the stamina, the memorization, and the vocal training required for a 13-year-old to hold that kind of performance. That commitment is a foundational pillar. It shows his ability to sustained focus over long, demanding durations, a trait we'll see repeated in his walks and his reading lists decades later.
Okay, so let's shift to the foundational relationship, the meeting with Paul Simon. That friendship that defined music history started in the 6th grade at PS 164. What's the story of their first artistic connection?
Well, the sources confirm they were drawn to each other, but their first joint endeavor wasn't actually music. It was the elementary school play Alice in Wonderland.
A theatrical start.
Exactly, a collaborative theatrical beginning. And here is where Garfunkel's early influence is highlighted. He claimed that Simon only became interested in singing seriously after hearing Garfunkel perform Nat King Cole's Too Young at a school talent show.
So Garfunkel is framed as the initial catalyst.
Subtly, yes. The one whose natural vocal gift kind of sparked Simon's own musical ambitions.
And that early synergy quickly turned into a commercial effort with the Tom and Jerry years, starting in 1956. And they weren't using their real names right. Big records gave them that sort of youthful, cartoon-inspired moniker.
They did. And what they were doing was explicitly derivative, but masterfully so. Their musical idols were the Everly Brothers.
They didn't just like them.
No, they intentionally imitated their specific sound. That close two-part vocal harmony where the voices blend so tightly they become a single, slightly wider instrument.
And it worked.
It worked immediately. In 1957, their single Hey Schoolgirl actually reached number 49 on the pop charts. This early success showed the commercial viability of that specific blended vocal sound.
But the journey wasn't straight up. After that initial rush, they went their separate ways. Garfunkel tried to fly solo under the name Artie Gar. He released a couple of singles.
Right, on Warwick and Octavia Records tracks like Dream Alone and Forgive Me, but they critically failed to chart.
And that struggle is a massive data point, isn't it?
Oh, it's huge. It shows that even with his inherent technical vocal genius, without Paul Simon's compositional output, the commercial engine just wasn't firing. This moment from 58 to 62 is crucial because it led Garfunkel directly to his most intensive pursuit of structure, the intellectual detour at Columbia University.
So let's track that internal motivation. Why, when he had a taste of pop success, did he retreat into the absolute certainty of academia? He began as an architecture major at Columbia.
And he was incredibly active. It wasn't just classes. He was a brother in Alpha Epsilon Pi, participating in tennis, skiing, fencing, bowling.
It sounds like a man trying to construct a perfect, well-rounded life for himself.
I think that's exactly it. It speaks to a profound need for external validation beyond the fleeting nature of pop music. Architecture in particular requires technical precision, mathematical structure, and aesthetic judgment, the very qualities he applied to his singing.
And while he ultimately shifted majors, earning a BA in art history in 1965, the truly astonishing commitment came next. The graduate work.
The decision to pursue a master's in mathematics education while actively beginning to record major label folk albums, you have to wonder about the cognitive dissonance there.
How did he even manage to compartmentalize those two demanding worlds?
He didn't just earn the MA in 1967. He completed coursework toward a doctorate, a PhD in mathematics education at Teachers College, Columbia, and he was doing this during the absolute commercial zenith of Simon and Garfunkel.
So in 1967, that's the graduate year.
That's the graduate year. He was flying to Los Angeles for major film soundtrack meetings and then returning to Manhattan to finish PhD-level courses in geometric theorems and pedagogical methodology. It's an almost unimaginable balancing act. It shows a person who deeply believes structure is the ultimate goal, even over global fame. He only dropped out once the musical obligations became completely overwhelming.
That is the ultimate underground man persona we will keep returning to. He could have just been the angel singer, but he chose to be the math scholar who happened to sing on the side.
And the sources provide that beautiful full-circle anecdote that binds his academic rigor back to his artistic success. While pursuing his studies at Columbia, his roommate, Sanford Greenberg, tragically lost his sight due to glaucoma.
And Garfunkel stepped in.
He dedicated himself to reading textbooks aloud to Greenberg, ensuring he could finish his studies and graduate with honors.
And that selfless academic assistance then returned to Garfunkel with profound interest.
Absolutely. When Simon returned from England and they needed to record a demo to try and secure a new deal, Greenberg, the man Garfunkel, helped through his deepest academic crisis, provided the crucial $500 loan.
Wow.
That money allowed Garfunkel to record the demo of The Sound of Silence. It's an incredible story of friendship and intellectual debt directly catalyzing one of the most significant careers in musical history.
So armed with that $500 loan that linked their friendship and academic history, they formally reformed as Simon and Garfunkel around 1963. They signed with Columbia Records, though their first album, Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. in 1964, was a failure.
A total failure. Critically and commercially, it was rooted in that folk purist sound of the era, and it flopped. The duo, disillusioned, immediately split. Paul Simon left for the UK to pursue a solo acoustic career, and Garfunkel went back to his graduate work.
It seemed like history was repeating itself.
It did, but then you have this classic moment of serendipity. In 1965, a producer named Tom Wilson, who had worked with Bob Dylan, decided to take the track, The Sound of Silence, from that failed album,
And he did it without telling them, right?
without notifying either Simon or Garfunkel. He took the original acoustic track, dubbed electric bass, drums, and electric guitar over it, and just released it as a single.
Which was almost sacrilegious for folk purists at the time.
Completely. But it worked. The single rocketed to #1. Simon was reportedly astonished to see the news on the British charts and immediately returned to the States to capitalize on this accidental success. That one act of production audacity just redefined their career trajectory entirely.
And that launched them into the era of major albums. Sounds of Silence, Parsley, Sage, Rosemary and Thyme, Bookends, and of course the phenomenal Bridge Over Troubled Water in 1970.
And their cultural integration was cemented by their work on the Graduate soundtrack in 1967. This film project provided one of the most famous songwriting anecdotes in history.
Mrs. Robinson.
Mrs. Robinson. Simon was trying to write a song for the film, and the sources say he was struggling with the name of the character he was writing about. He was actually considering calling her Mrs. Roosevelt.
But director Mike Nichols needed something more specific, more powerful. The sources say when Garfunkel mentioned Simon's indecision to Nichols, the director, ever the showman, interjected with the now legendary line, "Don't be ridiculous, we're making a movie here, it's Mrs. Robinson."
And that artistic directive provided the title that would become one of their most iconic songs.
The irony is that Garfunkel, the non-songwriter, was directly involved in coining the name of arguably their most famous song. And this is a perfect segue into examining Garfunkel's specific contributions, because he was always more than just the voice.
Yes, the narrative often simplifies him down to just the singer, but the sources insist he was the technical architect.
So how deep was his involvement in the studio beyond just singing that top line?
Deep enough that he was the crucial vocal arranger, and often the co-producer. Simon wrote the lyrics and the basic melody, but Garfunkel often determined exactly who sang which part, the precise harmonies, and, most importantly, how the finished product was produced and layered.
So that academic rigor.
Exactly. The eye for structure he developed with the wire recorder, architecture, and math, it translated directly into the engineering room.
And his creative credits are more explicit on some tracks. For instance, he took Simon's earlier folk song, Side of a Hill, and rewrote it as a poem called Canticle, which they counterpointed against the English folk tune Scarborough Fair.
And that blend produced the classic track Scarborough Fair Canticle. But if you want evidence of his experimental artistic mind operating independently of Simon's folk poetry, look at the Bookends album.
Voices of Old People.
Voices of Old People. Garfunkel created that audio montage. This wasn't a song, it was conceptual art recording snippets of the residents in a nursing home and assembling them into this textural ambient piece that served as a meditation on aging and memory. It's the kind of project you'd expect from a fine arts student, not a pop star.
And then there's The Boxer. The sources credit him with writing the arrangement on that track, which is maybe their most structurally ambitious song.
I would say it is. The Boxer is a masterpiece of layering, and that layering is where Garfunkel's architectural mind shines. You have to consider the elements. The recurring bass drum, the quiet chimes, that famous dramatic echo of the lyric "lie, la, lie."
And all those vocals at the end.
Most notably, the song contains the highest number of layered vocals they ever recorded. Reportedly, over 100 hours were spent recording the backing vocals alone in New York, Nashville, and St. Paul's Chapel.
Wow.
Garfunkel was the man in the booth, overseeing the painstaking, almost obsessive construction of those layers to achieve that monumental sound. He wasn't just arranging notes, he was arranging sonic space, treating the production like a mathematical equation that needed to be perfectly balanced.
Despite reaching that absolute apex of collaboration, the split came in 1970. It seems the structure just couldn't hold the weight of two egos, two diverging interests, and the sheer pressure of fame.
No, the split was immediate after Bridge Over Troubled Water, which was their most successful album. It was a divergence of interests. Simon wanted to write and explore different genres. Garfunkel wanted to act and, frankly, just retreat from the intensity of that partnership.
The relationship then became this cycle of high-profile reunions interspersed with deep resentment. The first notable reunion was that 1975 single, My Little Town.
Right, and this song appeared on both of their respective solo albums that year. And the sources provide a fascinating, slightly passive-aggressive motive for the reunion. Paul Simon reportedly wrote the song for Garfunkel, claiming that Garfunkel's solo output lacked bite.
Wow. But the song is about Garfunkel's childhood.
Exactly. The lyrical content is entirely rooted in Garfunkel's history, detailing his childhood in Queens. So Simon was, on the one hand, giving Garfunkel a boost, but at the same time, he was critiquing his solo artistic choices. This just speaks to the complexity of their rivalry,
Right.
intertwined professionally, but deeply competitive personally.
And then that rivalry just metastasized fully during the 1980s. Their 1981 Central Park reunion concert was a massive success, leading to a world tour and the plan for a new reunion album called Think Too Much.
But that project completely fell apart. Due to significant unresolvable disagreements during the recording process, the project was just aborted. Simon took the material, reworked it, and released it alone as his 1984 solo album, Hearts and Bones. And crucially, the sources strongly indicate that Simon allegedly mixed out Garfunkel's voice from the entire record.
He just erased him from the tapes.
He erased him. Imagine the creative rejection, the physical removal of the angel singer's contribution from material they had worked on together. It highlights a relationship defined by cycles of intense creation and destructive subtraction.
Despite all that toxicity, the public hunger for that perfect harmony never waned. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1990, and the reunion tours kept happening.
Yes, and receiving the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2003 led directly to the acclaimed Old Friends Tour. That tour culminated in 2004 with a performance in Rome that drew an estimated 600,000 people to the Colosseum area. The public sees the perfection. They don't see the complexity of the personal history. The world just demanded that Garfunkel step back into that structural role of the voice.
So let's track Garfunkel's career immediately following that 1970 split. His first move was not back to music, but a full-time pivot into acting, leveraging those early theatrical instincts from Alice in Wonderland.
And he did it with Mike Nichols, the same director from The Graduate. He starred in Catch-22 in 1970 and the highly successful Carnal Knowledge in 1971.
And this wasn't just a vanity project. He was good.
He was very good. His performance as Sandy in Carnal Knowledge, alongside Jack Nicholson and Candice Bergen, earned him a nomination for Best Supporting Actor at the 1972 Golden Globe Awards. He proved that his capacity for sustained discipline could be applied to interpretation and character study, not just to vocal performance.
But the next move is maybe the most bizarre psychological retreat in modern music history. During a 3-year hiatus in the early 1970s, he entirely stepped away from Hollywood and music and put his MA in mathematics education to use. For several months, he worked as a geometry teacher.
A geometry teacher for high school sophomores at the short-lived Litchfield Academy in Connecticut.
I mean, we really need to pause here and think about that. He was a Golden Globe nominee, a global superstar, and he chose to spend his days grading homework and teaching teenagers the immutable certainty of the Pythagorean theorem.
It suggests that when the artistic and personal world of Simon and Garfunkel became too chaotic, too emotionally fraught, and just too famous, he sought refuge in a world where answers are always clear and quantifiable. Geometry offered a certainty that fame never could.
And that deep need for structure eventually allowed him to re-engage with music. In 1973, he released his solo debut, Angel Clare, which contained the U.S. hit All I Know, and reached number 5 on the charts.
But his solo career trajectory was defined less by U.S. chart dominance and more by massive international appeal. His 1975 album Breakaway confirms this. It featured his now classic cover of the 1934 standard, I Only Have Eyes for You.
And that song became his first ever solo UK #1 single.
Right. His ethereal voice seemed to connect with European audiences in a way that sometimes eluded the U.S., where singer-songwriters were more dominant. Garfunkel was, in a sense, a throwback to the great interpreters of the mid-20th century.
And his subsequent work continued this trend. While his 1977 album Watermark was initially slow to gain traction, its re-release featured his beautiful rendition of Sam Cooke's What a Wonderful World.
What's fascinating about this version is that the backing vocals feature the familiar sound of Paul Simon alongside James Taylor. That track eventually hit #1 on the U.S. Adult Contemporary chart, showing that even in his solo success, the shadow of his former partner could still contribute to a breakthrough moment.
The greatest example of this market divergence came with his 1979 album Fate for Breakfast. In the U.S., it was a flop.
A complete flop, only reaching number 67. However, on the strength of the single Bright Eyes, which was featured in the animated film Watership Down, the album became a massive UK success.
It wasn't just a hit, it was
Bright Eyes was not only a UK #1 hit, but it was officially the best-selling single of the entire year in the UK in 1979. A failure in the US market was the defining pop song of the year across the pond.
Shifting gears now, that period of commercial oscillation came to a sudden, devastating halt with a profound personal tragedy in 1979.
Yeah. His longtime girlfriend, the actress and photographer Lori Bird, whom he had been involved with since 1974, died by suicide in their Manhattan apartment.
And that just sent him into a spiral.
The sources confirm this left Garfunkel in a state of deep, sustained depression. He later revealed the tragic, cyclical nature of the event. Bird's mother had also committed suicide at a young age, 26. This overwhelming loss and the weight of that tragic family history led him into a professional and personal withdrawal that lasted for years.
His 1981 album, Scissors Cut, was dedicated to Bird, but it reflected his emotional state with disappointing sales. And then his father died in the mid-'80s and the withdrawal deepened.
Right, he took a significant 6-year break from recording, not releasing another album until Lefty in 1988.
And this profound depression and professional retreat forced him to find a new physical means of coping. This is where we see the structural mind take over in an entirely new way, manifesting as the Great Walks.
And this was not just leisurely travel. This was an extraordinary, disciplined, physical project that defined his middle life.
Okay, let's track the sheer scale of this. He started small, walking across Japan in the early 1980s. But that was just a warm-up, right? Let's detail the scope of his walk across America.
Okay, so between 1983 and 1997, that's a span of 14 years, Garfunkel meticulously completed 40 separate excursions to walk across the entire United States.
40 trips.
40. He would fly to a specific point, walk for several weeks, return home for family and professional obligations, and then fly back to the exact mile marker where he had left off to resume the journey. He traversed the country, step by painstaking step, from New York City all the way to the Pacific coast of Oregon.
To commit to an organized physical structure that lasted 14 years, requiring such detailed itinerary planning, it speaks volumes about his need to impose order on emotional chaos. This was a physical manifestation of his mathematical discipline.
And he didn't stop once he hit the Pacific. The global ambition continued. In May 1998, he started a walk across Europe, beginning in Ireland. He continued this installment walk, often alone, finally concluding the monumental journey in Istanbul, Turkey in 2015.
We're talking about 30 years of dedicated physical progress across 2 continents.
It's unbelievable.
And did the sources provide any insight into what he was doing mentally during these treks? Was it purely physical exercise, or was it a creative process?
The walks were explicitly a time for introspection and creation. While on the S&G 1981-82 reunion tour, he started writing prose poetry. The walks became the perfect environment for this practice. The notes he accumulated on the road formed the backbone of his collection Stillwater, which came out in 1989.
So the writing came from the walking.
Directly. The collection addressed his depression, the tragedy of Lori Bird's death, and his ongoing complex relationship with Paul Simon. The physical separation allowed him the mental distance to process these lifelong emotional and professional stresses and translate them into art.
Moving into the late 1990s, we see this late-career intellectual and artistic resurgence, where the structured private life began to intersect more freely with his public persona.
Yes, and this is a period where he starts celebrating the structure he's built. His 1996 live album, Across America, was recorded at the historic Registry Hall on Ellis Island, marking the final stage of his U.S. walk. And the performance itself was deeply personal, featuring collaborations with his wife Kim and their son James, weaving family directly into the professional narrative.
And he showed a surprising willingness to embrace lighter, more niche media roles. He performed the theme song for the TV series Brooklyn Bridge, and, my favorite, he voiced a singing moose on an episode of the children's show Arthur in 1998.
A singing moose. It reflects a renewed sense of humor and confidence. And his performance of Eric Idle's Always Look on the Bright Side of Life was used over the credits of the film as good as it gets. The man who spent 2 decades walking in solitude was now happy to deliver this wry piece of musical commentary for a major motion picture.
And shifting to his creative output, in 2002, he finally embraced the role of the songwriter. He released Everything Waits to be Noticed, collaborating with Maya Sharp and Buddy Monlock. This is a monumental shift for a man who famously didn't write songs during his peak years.
Yes, and the method is crucial. The album incorporated several songs that were adapted directly from the prose poems he had been writing during his long walks.
So it all comes full circle.
Exactly. The physical discipline of the walk fed the writing, and the writing eventually transformed into song. It confirms that the solo career finally found its structural voice not by adopting Simon's style, but by formalizing his own intellectual and solitary work.
And that artistic restoration coincided with professional reconciliation. The 2003 Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award reignited the partnership, leading to that Old Friends tour.
The demand for that harmony was massive, culminating in that free concert at the Colosseum in Rome in 2004, drawing 600,000 people. It felt like a sustained, successful conclusion to the Simon and Garfunkel saga. But this period of success soon ran into a profound physical challenge: the crisis of the voice.
In January 2010, Art Garfunkel suffered what sounds like a freak accident vocal cord damage after choking briefly on a piece of lobster. For a singer whose entire identity is tied to the purity of his high tenor, this must have been just catastrophic.
It was devastating. The injury resulted in vocal cord paresis, a partial paralysis. The impact was immediate and forced the cancellation of the subsequent Simon and Garfunkel tour. Garfunkel described his first performance attempt after the injury as profoundly difficult. Terrible and crazy nervous, relying on Paul Simon and the crowd's love to sustain him.
The loss of control over his most disciplined instrument must have been an existential challenge.
It was. And what's fascinating here is that his recovery wasn't just physical therapy. It was tied directly back to his life habits, reinforcing that theme of discipline applied to all areas of his life.
Right. He announced that his recovery, which began in November 2010, was significantly aided by quitting smoking.
Yes, and the sources confirm that years of smoking had already contributed to his natural tenor voice lowering in pitch as he reached his late 50s. Quitting was a crucial act of self-discipline, a recognition that to regain the instrument, he had to master the habit. By 2014, he confidently stated his voice was 96% back, and he was able to resume touring. Remarkable resilience.
So let's turn now to the private man revealed in his later years. After his first marriage ended in the mid-70s, he eventually found stability with Catherine Kim Cermak, a former model he met while shooting a film in 1985. They married in '88 and have 2 sons.
And that family life became the central anchor. It's also interesting to note that his 2 sons, born in 1990 and 2005, were carried by a surrogate mother, reflecting a modern approach to family structure within his highly traditional persona. And his son, Arthur Jr., has also embarked on a singing career.
And the sources confirm he hasn't shied away from revealing his human flaws. He published his memoir, What Is It All But Luminous, in 2017. And he also had minor run-ins with the law, having been arrested twice for marijuana possession in 2004 and 2005. A fascinating contrast to the meticulous academic.
And shifting to his most recent musical update, this brings us to that family legacy. In 2024, Garfunkel released a new studio album entitled Father and Son, a duets album recorded entirely with his son, Art Garfunkel Jr.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The album features 12 cover songs, including classics like Blackbird and Blue Moon, and a new recording of Old Friends.
Right, and Art Jr. provided some insight into the generational collaboration. He noted that his father chose songs primarily from the 1940s, while he chose songs from the 1980s. It's a beautifully structured conversation across time, defining a new harmony between their 2 eras.
And Father and Son may represent the final major active output of his recording career. In April 2023, his management announced that he had decided not to return to touring for the foreseeable future, suggesting the disciplined, physically demanding schedule of performance is finally coming to a close.
But the internal discipline, the academic rigor, is still running at full speed, and we have to dedicate some time to the bibliophile's discipline because this is the ultimate encapsulation of his architectural mind. Garfunkel has maintained a year-by-year list of every single book he has read since 1968.
Over 1,000 books.
That list currently stands at well over 1,000 books. And you have to think about the commitment. This is not just reading, it's archiving the reading, cataloging the knowledge. This is the same impulse that drove him to map out his walks and master geometry. He has to quantify his learning and structure his intake of information.
But the specificity of his reading list takes this beyond mere hobby and elevates it to a philosophical endeavor. The sources note that he went to the extreme length of reading the entire Random House dictionary.
That is profound. Why read the entire dictionary? Because he wants to understand the absolute structural building blocks of language. Just as he mastered the architecture of music with his wire recorder and the architecture of space with his walks, he demanded mastery over the very components of communication. It's a statement about seeking total foundational knowledge and just rejecting any superficial approach.
And his devotion to Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Confessions reinforces this commitment to cyclical, intense introspection. He's read Confessions at least 3 times.
and the sources highlight the precise data points. Confessions was the first book on his list, book number 252 and book number 1000.
So it's not just a favorite book.
No, it's a milestone marker. Every time he hits a major quantitative goal, starting his list, crossing a mid-century mark, hitting the millennium mark, he returns to Rousseau's autobiography. This signifies that his intellectual journey is fundamentally tied to self-discovery and the constant re-examination of his own life and motivations, using a key philosophical text as his benchmark.
We began this deep dive searching for the man behind the magnificent voice, and what we found was an extraordinary portrait of a human being driven by the need for structure. We started with the famous harmony partner and ended with a retired math student who read the dictionary cover to cover, meticulously cataloged over 1,000 books, and walked across 2 continents over 3 decades.
Garfunkel's life provides this potent synthesis of conflicting needs. His profound success was rooted in his application of intellectual discipline to art, treating the microphone as meticulously as he treated a geometric proof. The structure, the rigorous academic paths, the measurable book lists, the exhaustive itineraries of the walks, that was his defense mechanism against the artistic chaos, the emotional depth, and the deep depression that followed personal tragedy.
His capacity for sustained, deep focus is really the core theme of his survival and his lasting creative contribution.
It is.
So, what does this all mean for you, the learner? The knowledge we've gained isn't simply trivia. It's a powerful lesson in how sustained creative genius often requires an equally sustained, rigorous intellectual discipline. Garfunkel's success wasn't random. It was the product of applying academic rigor to art and then applying physical rigor to healing. He proved that the intellectual background is never wasted, regardless of the field you ultimately inhabit.
And the image of Garfunkel walking those thousands of miles, physically separating himself from the chaos of celebrity, using the movement to generate new forms of prose poetry, that is the ultimate insight. His greatest insights emerged from that self-imposed, decades-long discipline, movement, and distance.
So reflect on the idea that sometimes the greatest personal and creative breakthroughs require the deepest physical and intellectual commitments. Consider, if you were to commit to an equivalent multi-year disciplined project of self-discovery, something on the scale of reading 1,000 books or meticulously charting a decade-long personal journey, what unexpected piece of knowledge or unique art might emerge for you? What deep structural commitment could unlock your next great breakthrough?